Good morning. Happy Friday. Thanks for joining us here on the Weather Desk. I'm meteorologist Craig Moeller. We're going to talk about our headlines, what we've got for you, a packed show. So I want to jump right into it in today's Weather Desk, where we always talk about some of the big weather headlines, the top weather headlines from across the nation and sometimes around the world. What we have for you, a Blue Origin rocket explosion, what that could mean for NASA and the plans to get to the moon. We'll talk about that. South Carolina residents, some folks reporting a sonic boom. They thought it was an earthquake. It wasn't. What folks are investigating there. So we'll have those stories. Then we're going to talk about the tropics, a little something brewing in the eastern Pacific, perhaps. We'll get into that a little later in the show. And then, you know, the recovery efforts from Hurricane Helene in western parts of North Carolina. We've talked so much about that here on the Weather Desk. Well, the recent heavy rains created some flooding issues, and some of those recovery steps, some of the improvements to the area, those systems were tested with the heavy rain. We'll let you know how they fared and what created stress, all that kind of stuff. We'll talk about the drought monitor update. It got in late yesterday after the Weather Desk was done, but we do have it now. And we're going to talk about a few things of note where we have seen some significant improvement. Other areas still needing rain, but at least the previous week's rain did help in some areas, and we'll show you that. In addition, we're fearing a tough wheat season ahead. We're going to hear from some wheat growers in Kansas that are concerned. I was looking into it a little bit. It may be one of the poorest wheat harvests since like the early 1970s. So potential problems with that. We'll talk about it. And then weather history, the Johnstown flood. That will have the severe weather outlook, and the weekend is here. It's going to be a good one for Hampton Roads. So a lot to break down with you, and we are going to start again with the concern about a potential setback. What are we talking about? Well, here's Florida, and as we zoom into Cape Canaveral, we're going to talk about this last night down at Cape Canaveral. It's being called one of the largest explosions in space flight history, and again, it could pose a major setback for NASA's upcoming missions to the moon. Here's ABC's Sophie Flay.
It was like something out of a disaster movie. A massive fireball erupting, lighting up the night sky over Cape Canaveral, Florida. A Blue Origin rocket exploding on the launch pad. Blue Origin founder Jeff Bezos says all personnel are safe. No one was on board. The company says the rocket experienced an anomaly during an engine test for the massive 320-foot-tall New Glenn rocket, sending a massive shockwave rippling through the air. Before the explosion, 2 towers could be seen, one on either side of the rocket, to protect it from lightning. But now, only 1 tower remains. Residents in the area who've grown accustomed to space launches and failures say this one felt different.
This one was more of more of a violent shake. So we were all like, whoa, that's different.
Jeff Bezos saying it's too early to know the root cause, but we're already working to find it. Very rough day, but we'll rebuild whatever needs rebuilding and get back to flying. It's worth it. The explosion comes just days after NASA announced a nearly $500 million contract with Blue Origin to carry out various missions to the moon, including the deliveries of a lunar lander and lunar rovers using a New Glenn rocket.
Blue Origin had emerged as really a key player in NASA's efforts to return to the moon and really compete with China in that regard. And so this is pretty devastating to that effect, and it just increases the pressure on SpaceX to perform with its Starship vehicle. A lot of NASA's eggs are now in just a single basket.
Experts now predict delays, citing the loss of the rocket, but also the loss of the launch pad, which is the only one equipped to launch the New Glenn.
It takes more than a year to build these. These are probably multi-$100 million to billion-dollar facilities.
Sophie Flay, ABC News, New York.
We'll have to monitor all the developments with that. And again, that was what they call like a static test. They weren't launching the rocket. It was tethered down to keep it from actually lifting, but they wanted to fire the systems, check everything, make sure the engineers knew how the rocket would perform. There was the anomaly, and you saw the explosion. All right, we're going to turn our attention to South Carolina because a loud boom was heard and felt across parts of South Carolina yesterday. Many residents initially thought it was an earthquake. Take a listen. The U.S. Geological Survey says it was not an earthquake. They explained that seismic magnitude scales don't apply to sonic booms, so they manually assigned a magnitude of 0.0. Sonic booms happen when objects travel faster than the speed of sound. That's about 750 miles per hour at sea level. There are no reports of damage or injuries at this time, and authorities are continuing to look into the source of that boom. If we hear anything, we will pass it along. Coming up, heavy rain dampening Helene recovery across parts of North Carolina. The new measures now being implemented to stop future disasters. Plus, drought conditions now putting farmers in the Midwest on alert. Why this wheat season could be the worst in more than 5 decades. Welcome back to the Weather Desk. We're going to talk about the tropical weather outlook. And, you know, we're still a weekend away from the official start of the Atlantic hurricane season. As we take a look here, we're going to really focus on what's happening in the Eastern Pacific. Now, remember, the Eastern Pacific season starts in mid-May, and there are some areas of storminess or convection starting to pop up here in the Eastern Pacific. So we're going to be watching this, because you can see while it's far away from land right now, National Hurricane Center believes there's a 60% or a moderate threat that this thing develops within the next 7 days. This is the first time that we've had anything really with a risk of development so far this season. So I wanted to make sure that you see that. And here's Hawaii way out here. So they're going to want to continue to monitor that. Remember, this season with the developing El Nino and potentially a strong El Nino later in the season, the likelihood of hurricanes in the Atlantic basin goes down, but perhaps more hurricane activity in the Eastern Pacific, and that could eventually impact the Hawaiian Islands. We'll be watching that throughout the entire hurricane season this summer. As far as things go in the Atlantic basin, it's still quiet, clear in the Caribbean, the Gulf. Seeing a little bit of convection here in the southern part of the Gulf, but nothing that's showing signs of tropical organization. The rest of the main development region is clear, so no tropical activity expected over the next 7 days. That is some good news there. Again, we've got some moisture down in the central and southern part of the Gulf, and we've been watching moisture streaming up from the Gulf up through the southeast, and that led to very heavy rain. In North Carolina, 2 communities that were devastated by Hurricane Helene are once again dealing with the storm's lingering effects after being drenched with their heaviest rainfall since Helene first hit. Taylor Thompson reports.
The lake fared very well for the amount of water that was coming in. We were able to maintain those lake levels and keep all systems within normal range.
Dustin Waycaster says they put in several protective measures since Helene and have managed to put their warning siren weather alert system back online.
We actually had to utilize it the other night during the heavy rainfall on the western end of the county.
He knows the fear those sirens bring to residents because he has his own fears too.
It wasn't really the sirens going off or anything like that. It was just seeing the amount of water and the debris that was, flowing into our lake right after we just got finished opening up.
What do we want to do today? We want a tube, I know that.
The lake opened Memorial Day weekend, 20 months since Helene. Mark Helms just got back on the water.
I didn't think I had any PTSD from Helene, but for sure, my wife and I have a little creek in the backyard, and I came home that night, and I always just look out there as a barometer. I'll bring skis, and I'll bring wakeboards. What size shoes you wear?
Helms and his wife run Lake Lure Adventure Company. Seeing his creek rise brought back a lot of emotion.
For sure, there was a fear of, oh Lord, what's going to be in the lake tomorrow morning, or are the roads going to be okay?
That panic stretched over into Bat Cave.
We went from drought and fighting wildfires to flooding.
Steve Freeman says response is unfortunately second nature now.
You just got to go with it. We were more concerned with anybody in danger, so we started rushing around before we even got the first call. Start making people aware. That's the main thing with it all. That's what saves lives.
Both communities are thankful no one was hurt while cleanup continues.
Nobody that was here during Helene will forget it anytime soon.
It has been a really tough road for the folks down in western North Carolina, back into Tennessee as well. They've been dealing with a lot of those similar issues. What I will tell you now is the rain that we got, while again it maybe frayed a few nerves and got folks a little concerned, are we dealing with more of this extensive flooding? When it came, it did provide some needed relief in terms of the drought. And I want to update you now on how the latest drought monitor has changed from last week. Again, this came in a little later than normal. It always comes out at 8:30. It was a little bit delayed yesterday. And when it finally came in, areas that I had seen that were severe drought up on the Middle Peninsula, talking about Gloucester, parts of Matthews County, back off to the northwest of that, these areas were severe. Now, with this newest drought monitor, with the recent rains over the last week, it is now moderate drought here. Same thing, Poquoson back through York. You can see back up to areas north of Williamsburg and out towards Richmond, moderate drought. These areas were severe. Now, it's still severe across Hampton and most of Newport News. South side really hasn't changed much either. North Carolina, right along the state line, up into southern Virginia Beach and southern Chesapeake, moderate drought there. I will say that extra almost 1.5 inches of rain that we had in Norfolk did not go into the making of this graphic. That will be accounted for next week. That came after this data was all compiled. So hopefully we'll see this map change a little bit more next Thursday when the next one comes out. But there are some other good signs. Again, there was more widespread extreme drought out here, and some of that has been chipped away from extreme now down to severe. And I know that still sounds bad, but it's not as bad as it was. Remember, if you saw this map last week, this was all shaded in red, and there was some exceptional drought in the northwest part of the Tar Heel State. That exceptional drought is gone now. It's still extreme there, but areas that were extreme from Charlotte back out towards Asheville, these areas here were extreme. Now it's just severe, and some of this area also paired away severe. So the rains that we got, that rain that created the stress out towards the mountains there in western parts of North Carolina, has actually been beneficial for the overall soil moisture, and that moisture content needs to continue to come up. So we'll see if these areas change a little bit more with the heavy rain a couple days ago. All right, again, Asheville now in severe drought versus extreme. And I just wanted to mention that area of exceptional drought that we've been watching for a long time down in Georgia, in North Florida. There's still exceptional drought, but this area has been pared down a little bit. So there has been some relief down across the southeast U.S. And then I want to talk about what's going on out in Kansas, because while the eastern part of Kansas is in good shape, it's been very dry out to the west. There are concerns. Tough times could be about to hit some of the farmers here in America's heartland, as weather conditions have created a wheat crop that is expected to be the worst in more than 50 years for Kansas. Kate Devine has the details.
Walking through the beautiful Kansas wheat fields this time of year, you'd usually see tall green stalks. Brian Bates says this year looks different.
You see how short it is. Not even in this spot right here, not even to my knees. But you get out here a little ways, it's a little bit taller. The heads in this field aren't bent down yet.
Bates has farmed his entire life in Conway Springs. He says the crop got off to a strong start last fall. Then the rain stopped.
We were running out of moisture. Late February would be it coming out of dormancy. And then, you know, just very, very little rainfall in April and May when the crop needs it the most. We just didn't have much at all. So that has presented its own set of challenges.
The USDA says this year's wheat production is forecast to drop 21% from last year. The agency says it could be the smallest wheat crop in the country since 1972, especially in Kansas, one of the top producers of wheat in the U.S. Bates says unusual heat made matters worse.
We've had warmer than normal temperatures during those times, some 90-degree temperatures in April and maybe some 90-degree temperatures in March.
The dry conditions have also pushed harvests earlier than normal.
In my life, we've only cut one time in May that I can remember. More often than not, as a kid, I remember we would be starting harvest on Father's Day, and so getting a start here end of May, 1st of June is just really unusual.
And while farmers are expecting a smaller crop and an earlier cut, Bates says they're not giving up hope.
Farmers, I think, were always optimistic that the crop is going to be better than what it looks. So I'm hopeful that you know, it looks better, it yields better than it looks.
According to the USDA, more than half of the wheat crop in Kansas is currently rated as poor or very poor. So we'll see. Hopefully some of those farmers will get some good news, but it's not looking great right now there. Now, I did want to mention just nationally, you see ample moisture across Missouri, eastern Kansas, southern Iowa, back into Illinois, and then the northern part of the Ohio River Valley through the Great Lakes. There's actually been some flooding issues at times over the last few months in those areas, so ample rain there. And one other thing, you know, we've had such dry conditions. We talked a lot about the snow drought. They still have areas with some exceptional drought in the central and northwest parts of Colorado, but there are other areas that were extreme that are starting to now be downgraded a little bit from extreme to just severe. So some improvements there, and out to the southwest, we're still seeing some areas that are starting to do a little bit better. So some encouraging news concerning the drought. All right, we're going to take another quick break. When we come back, we're going to dive into the history books and learn more about the Jamestown flood, how it forever changed disaster relief across the country. Welcome back to the Weather Desk. You know, going into the break, I said Jamestown flood. We have a Jamestown, a historic Jamestown here in Southeast Virginia. I meant to say Johnstown. And I want to show you where Johnstown, Pennsylvania is located. Here's Pittsburgh. You notice east of Pittsburgh, there's this little town, Johnstown. And there it is, Johnstown, Pennsylvania. It was back in 1889, the Johnstown flood devastated this Pennsylvania steel town and forever changed how America responds to catastrophe. Meteorologist Evan Stewart looks back on how the disaster occurred and how the American Red Cross became a national force in disaster relief.
In late May of 1889, days of relentless rain soaked the mountains of western Pennsylvania. And above the quiet steel town of Johnstown sat an aging dam that was holding back millions of tons of water. Then on May 31st, the dam failed. A massive wall of water surged down the valley at nearly 40 miles per hour, sweeping away homes, trains, bridges, and entire neighborhoods. More than 2,200 people were killed. It became the deadliest flooding disaster in American history at the time. But the story of the Johnstown flood is about more than weather. Yeah, the heavy rain triggered the disaster, but poor maintenance and human negligence turned it into a catastrophe. The flood changed America in many ways. It launched one of the nation's first large-scale disaster relief efforts, led by Clara Barton and the American Red Cross. It also raised new questions about dam safety, infrastructure, oversight, and corporate responsibility. So the weather started the disaster, but what America learned afterward changed the country for generations.
All right, Evan, thank you so much. You're taking a live look right now over Virginia Beach at the ocean front. What a gorgeous day. We've got a lot of sunshine. We'll take one more quick break. When we come back, I've got your weekend forecast for Hampton Roads. All right, let's talk about the upcoming weekend. A lot of sunshine for Saturday, mid-70s. We'll see temperatures in the lower 70s, mostly sunny for Sunday. Really a beautiful weekend, a little bit below average. Our normal high is 80 degrees this time of year. If you're headed up to D.C., maybe you've got a road trip in the works up that way. 73 on Saturday, 75 Sunday. For Richmond and Charlottesville, upper 70s both days, maybe a couple degrees cooler on Sunday. At the Outer Banks, mid to upper 70s Saturday, back into the upper 60s with an onshore flow there on Sunday, so a little bit cooler. Our beach forecast today, gorgeous, tons of sunshine. UV index very high, it's an 8 for Norfolk. means about 20 minutes before a sunburn begins. Rip current threat is low, and the water temperature now reported 66 at the buoy out there just east of Virginia Beach. So a little cooler there than it was. We were in the upper 60s, and now the Chesapeake Bay went from 70, 71 back down to 69. So lower part of the bay a little cooler as well. Maybe slightly gusty. I mean, gust to 20 knots, nothing crazy out there. The winds will generally ease, but we did have a small craft advisory early this morning on the bay. Those winds are easing up. Wet back in the central U.S. and a little bit of storminess potentially later today along this frontal boundary out there. High pressure will be our dominant feature. That's going to keep us cool and clear heading into the weekend. This is where we could see some severe storms. There is a risk here in western Texas for tornadoes. It's just that first elevated tier, not, a super great threat, but there might be an isolated tornado somewhere out there. That's for today. Tomorrow, Saturday, we've got chances for storms level 2 threat, South Dakota into Nebraska, and a chance for storms back in this area again on Sunday. None of that for us. We're going to enjoy the sunshine, beautiful weather as we head into the weekend. Here's the futurecast. Quite honestly, simply mid 70s near the coast, upper 70s to low 80s inland, and we are looking at mainly clear skies tonight, mostly sunny heading into your Saturday. You see the sunshine right now at the Thompson Creek Window Company Skyview. It is a beautiful day. We're going to enjoy these temperatures. Very, very comfortable across the south side and on the peninsula. 79, all those locations. Cooler to the eastern shore and at the Outer Banks. We'll see temperatures in the lower to mid 80s inland. Here's a look at the 7-day forecast. The temperatures will be trending down, as I mentioned, through Saturday and Sunday, back to 80 for the first day of June. Temperatures upper 70s to low 80s for the rest of the week. I hope you have a great weekend. We'll see you next time right here from the Weather Desk.